3 words, that is all it takes. Open the Gospel of John to its very first line, and before he says one thing about a manger, a miracle, or a cross, John reaches back and picks up the oldest words in the Bible. In the beginning, every person sitting in that first-century synagogue knew those words in their bones. They were the opening of Genesis, the first breath of Scripture, the line read aloud over and over for 1,000 years. And John, writing the most soaring, most theological gospel of the 4, chooses to start not with something new, but with the very first sentence of the whole story. Stay with me, because this is stranger than it looks. You would expect the gospel that reaches the highest to start the highest. Up in the clouds, up in eternity somewhere. Instead, it starts on the ground floor of the Bible, in Genesis, at creation. And here is the tension I want you to hold all the way to the end. John begins in Genesis, but by the time you reach verse 14, he has quietly stopped sounding like Genesis at all. The creation language fades out, and something else takes its place, a tent, a glory, a mountain, a man named Moses. John opens the door in one book of the Bible and walks you out through another. Watch how he does it, because that move is the entire point. From the first line to the 14th, God kept moving closer. That is the phrase to hold on to, remember it, because everything hangs on it. Now, most of us were handed John chapter 1 as a single shining proof. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that line is true, and it is enormous. We read it, we underline it, and we file it away as the verse that settles the argument. Jesus is God, done. The prologue becomes a beautiful stained glass window we admire on the way past. A mystical doctrine statement. Jesus is divine. Jesus was there at creation. Isn't that lovely? Turn the page. But John did not build a window. He built a corridor, and every step of that corridor is carrying you somewhere on purpose. And listen to how he keeps the Genesis music playing in the first few steps, so you feel the ground under you before it shifts. In him was life, John says, and the life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Light, darkness, do you hear where you are standing? You are back on the first page of Genesis, where the earth is formless and dark and empty, and the very first thing God does is speak. Let there be light, and there was light. John takes that opening act of creation, the light cutting into the dark, and he tells you it is still happening. The light is still shining. The darkness still has not swallowed it. He is not just remembering creation. He is telling you a new one has begun, and the same voice is behind it. So hold that picture, the void, the dark, a voice speaking light into it. That is the world John has built by verse 5. And it is exactly there, with creation ringing in your ears, that the ground moves under you. Here is the verse where everything turns. John chapter 1 verse 14. In most English Bibles it reads like this: "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us," dwelt, lived, resided, a quiet, ordinary word. He moved into the neighborhood. And if that soft little word is all you hear, you walk straight past the loudest thing in the sentence. Because John did not write lived, watch what he actually did. The Greek word sitting under dwelt is eskēnōsen. Say it slowly with me. Eskēnōsen. It does not mean lived in a house. It does not mean settled down on a street. It means he pitched a tent. It means he tabernacled. And it is built straight out of another word, eskēnē, which is the exact word the Greek Old Testament uses for one specific object. The tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the portable tent that Israel carried through the wilderness for 40 years. The tent where the presence of God himself came down to live in the middle of his people. Now watch the whole sentence change shape. The Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us. Suddenly you are not in a neighborhood at all. You are in the desert. You are standing at the tent of meeting. And God has come down. Most English Bibles flatten it to dwelt, and the tent vanishes in plain sight. But John chose that word like a man setting a hook. And you can tell he did it on purpose, because of the very next thing he says. Read it slowly. "And we beheld his glory." Glory, the instant the word pitches his tent, glory shows up. That is not decoration, and no first-century reader would have missed it. Because there is a scene at the very end of Exodus, chapter 40, verse 34, and it goes like this. Moses finishes building the tabernacle, months of work, every board and clasp and curtain made exactly as instructed. The last piece is set in place, and then the cloud comes down. The glory of the Lord fills that tent so completely, so heavily that Moses, the man who spoke with God face to face, the man who led the whole nation out of Egypt, cannot even walk through the door of the thing he just built. Think about that. He is standing outside his own tent, shut out, not by a lock but by sheer weight of presence. The cloud settles, the glory lands, The tent is full of God, so full there is no room left for a man to stand. The tent and the glory that fills it, John sets those two things side by side in a single breath. The tent and the glory. He is telling you, without ever spelling it out, what the tent was always for. It was for glory, it was for presence, it was for God to move in. God kept moving closer, but now we have to climb a mountain, because there is a wound in this story, and John is about to press his thumb right into it. Go back to Exodus chapter 33. Moses is up on Sinai, and he asks God for one thing. It is the boldest request anywhere in the Old Testament. Show me your glory, show me your face, let me see you. And the answer breaks your heart a little. No, you cannot see my face, God says, for no one may see me and live. So God hides Moses in the cleft of a rock, covers him with his own hand, and lets only his back pass by. The greatest prophet who ever lived begged to see the glory of God, and was told it would kill him. He got the afterglow, a glimpse of where God had just been, never the face. Hold that, because it is not resolved yet. Moses asked to see the glory, and the answer was no. Keep that wound open, we are coming back for it. And then, on that same mountain, God does something astonishing. He passes in front of Moses, and he says his own name out loud. He describes his own character in his own words, and the words he reaches for are these. He is a God overflowing with steadfast love and faithfulness. In the Hebrew, chesed and emet, loyal love that will not let go, reliable truth you can stand on. It is the closest thing in the entire Old Testament to God defining himself, out loud, in his own voice. Now come back to John, verse 14. The Word pitched his tent, we beheld his glory. And John ends the sentence like this. Full of grace and truth, in Greek ris kai aletheia, and I want to be careful here, because honesty is the whole game, and a cheap overclaim would cheapen everything. This is not a word-for-word quotation of Exodus 34. It is an echo, a deliberate one, that many careful readers across the centuries have heard ringing in it. The same pairing, love and faithfulness, grace and truth, arriving at the exact moment the glory fills the tent. John is not copying Exodus, he is finishing its sentence. The character God spoke on the mountain now has a body. And 3 words later, John finally says the name out loud. He has been building to this the whole time, for the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. There is Moses, there is the mountain, and there at last is the name of the Word, Jesus. Now hear that line carefully, because it is easy to hear it wrong. John is not sneering at the law. He is not saying Moses handed you something bad and Jesus handed you something good. 1 verse earlier, John said we have all received grace upon grace. Grace stacked on grace, the law itself was a gift, one of the good ones. What John is drawing is not a line between something bad and something good. It is a line between a messenger and the presence himself. Moses carried the words down the mountain in his arms. Jesus is the mountain, come down to us. Moses spoke about the glory. Jesus is the glory, wearing skin, and now John closes the loop he tore open back on Sinai. Feel this one land, verse 18. No one has ever seen God. There it is again, the exact wall Moses smashed into. No one has seen God. Moses could not. You cannot. The wall is still standing. And then, in the same breath, John knocks it down. The only Son who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. The word under made him known is exegesis. It is the root of our English word exegesis, to draw the meaning out, to explain, to bring the hidden thing into the open where the light hits it. The Son does not merely talk about God from a distance. He draws God out into the open, into a face you can look at. Everything Moses was refused, the face, the glory, the seeing, John says plainly, we beheld it. Not on a mountaintop wrapped in cloud, not through a crack in a rock, with a hand over our eyes. In a human face, close enough to see across a table. And there is one more detail here worth saying quietly, without leaning any weight on it at all. In some of the oldest copies of this verse, the phrase is not the only Son, but something climbing even higher, the only God. Scholars still weigh carefully which words John first wrote, so I will not build a single thing on it. But even the possibility tells you how high this claim reaches. The one who makes the invisible God visible is not just a courier carrying a message from God. He is God made seeable, so step all the way back now and look at the shape of the whole thing at once. Because once you have seen the tent, you cannot unsee the pattern, and the pattern runs across the entire Bible from one end to the other. It starts in a garden. In Genesis, before anything breaks, God walks with the man and the woman in the cool of the evening. No tent needed, no curtain, no barrier, no warning, just presence right out in the open, the way it was always meant to be. And then the garden closes behind them, a flaming sword set at the gate, and the long ache of distance begins. But watch what God does with that distance. He does not shrug and walk away forever. He starts closing it. He gives Israel a tent, the tabernacle, so his glory can travel with them right through the wilderness. Then the tent hardens into a building, a temple of stone in Jerusalem, and the glory settles down into one fixed room. Garden, tent, temple, every stage a step nearer, God shrinking the gap between himself and the people he made with his own hands. And every single stage had the same heartbreaking catch. A veil, a barrier, a priest, a ritual, a rope line, a sign that said come this close and not 1 inch closer. The glory was real, it was right there, but it always sat behind a curtain. You could feel the weight of it, you could never see the face. And then in John chapter 1, the pattern hits the end of the road. The Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us. Not a tent of animal skins and wooden poles this time. A tent of skin and bone and breath, the glory that Moses could not survive looking at, the glory that filled the temple and hid behind the veil. That glory now has a pulse and a name, and it is standing out in the open where anyone can see it. This is the same story it was on page 1. God kept moving closer, garden, then tent, then temple, and now at last a person. This is why John started in Genesis. He was never only proving that Jesus is divine, he was showing you what that divinity came down here to do. The same voice that spoke light into the darkness of the void has now stepped into the darkness of one ordinary human life and lit it from the inside. The glory that was too much for Moses did not shrink itself down. It came closer. It put on a body soft enough to touch, so that the very thing that would have killed Moses could now sit on a hillside and hand out bread to fishermen. And in case you think we are reading too much into one word, John himself confirms the direction he is driving. Turn 1 chapter forward, in John chapter 2, Jesus stands inside the temple courts and calls his own body the true temple. Tear this down, he says, and in 3 days I will raise it up. John even stops to tell you Jesus meant his body. So the tabernacle reading of verse 14 is not something clever we are pressing onto the page from the outside. It is the road John himself is already driving down. The temple was never really about the building. The temple was always heading toward a person. There is one more thing worth knowing about the world John was writing into, and it makes the tent land even harder. That opening word, the word in Greek lo goes, carried a double weight for John's first readers. To the Jewish ear, the word of the Lord was the thing that created the world in Genesis and spoke through every prophet, living and active. To the Greek ear, the logos was the deep ordering reason behind the whole cosmos, the logic holding everything together. John reaches for a single word that both worlds already leaned toward, and then he does the unthinkable with it. He says that word became flesh, the Greek philosopher's cosmic principle and the Hebrew prophet's creating voice. John says has a face and we have seen it. And there is a reason that question burned so hot in John's own lifetime. By the time this gospel was likely finished, the temple in Jerusalem had been torn to the ground, the glory room gone, and a whole people were left asking, quietly and desperately, where does God dwell now? Into that silence John says a name. So let me turn all of this toward you now, because there is a quiet ache running under this whole story, and I suspect it is yours too. Here is a thing we do, almost all of us, we wait until we are presentable. Somewhere deep down we decide that God is welcome in the finished rooms of our lives, the ones we have swept and painted, the ones we would let a guest walk into. And the other rooms, the ones with the mess still on the floor, those have to be sorted out first, privately, before he is allowed anywhere near them. So we work on ourselves in the dark, we hold the worst of it back, thinking not yet, not that part, not until I have it fixed and folded. We keep the tent flap shut over the mess and hope he does not ask what is inside. Think of the person who has rehearsed an apology in their head for months and still cannot make the call, because they want to walk in already forgiven, already whole, already worthy of the conversation before they have it. Think of the one who only ever prays the polished prayers, the ones with good grammar and clean edges, and goes completely silent the second the raw and ugly thing rises up in their chest, because surely God does not want to hear that part out loud. We are all in some hidden corner, standing at the door, waiting to be clean enough to be let close. And the whole point of the tent is that God did not wait. The tabernacle in the wilderness was not pitched in a palace. It was pitched down in the dirt, in the dead center of a camp full of frightened, grumbling, unfaithful people who had just built a golden calf. And the glory came down into the middle of that camp anyway. And when the Word became flesh, he was not born into marble and gold. He was born into the mess, The dust, the animals, the poverty, the danger, the long walk with nowhere to lay his head. And he pitched his tent right there on purpose, with his eyes open. God kept moving closer, and he moved closest of all to the exact parts of us we were most certain we had to hide. You do not scrub the room clean and then invite him in. He walks into the room as it is, and that is the thing that finally makes it clean. Which leaves you with one question, and John built the entire prologue to set it right in front of your face. Early in the chapter, he draws a line straight down the middle of the human race. He came to his own, John writes, and his own did not receive him. But then, to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. One story, two responses, a door standing wide open, and the strange, quiet, almost unbelievable news that the door was never a rulebook at all. The door was a person. Moses asked to see the glory and was told no. You are being handed something Moses never got to hear. The glory has a face now, it is turned towards you, and the flap of the tent is already open. The whole Bible was leaning toward this moment the entire time. Not toward a doctrine you memorize, toward a homecoming, the God who spoke into the void, and then hid himself in the dark behind the veil, has finally stepped out into the light as someone you could reach out and touch. He kept moving closer, and the only question left is the one he sets down gently in your lap. Now that the distance is gone, now that the glory has a face and the tent is open, will you let him all the way in? Into the finished rooms, yes, but also into the one you keep locked. And if you know someone right now who is sure they have to become clean before they are allowed to come home, someone quietly working on themselves in the dark, waiting to be presentable enough to be loved, send this to them. Tell them the tent was pitched in the dust on purpose. Tell them the door is a person, and it is already standing open.